You'll have to excuse me because I've just broken out of hospital for a few hours and I can't move any of my limbs, so there's nothing I can do about it, I'm afraid. Oops. Well, it's an exciting time for psychedelic research. We finally reached a tipping point. Ever more evidence from rigorously conducted research is confirming what wonderful medications of the future psychedelics will be. They hail a paradigm shift of mental health care with potential benefits that extend far beyond the field of psychiatry. When used in the right conditions, they may not only treat a wide range of disorders, but also facilitate transformation and inspiration that can leave an indelible mark, affecting us at many different levels, from our basic physiology to the depths of our souls. They can fundamentally alter our mood, perceptions, and belief system. They can spark that aha moment that can change our destiny. Informed opinion is, at last, recognizing the possibility that psychedelics may have an important part to play in addressing many of our current crises, from mental and physical health to ecological and spiritual. This recognition is the result of the work that we, the international psychedelic research community, have accomplished over the past decade, carrying out pioneering research that demonstrates the beneficial effects of psychedelic-assisted therapy, particularly when compared with the currently available conventional therapies. In the UK, our Beckley Imperial Research Programme has produced some very groundbreaking results, from the first neuroimaging study of LSD to the first study looking into the potential of psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy to overcome treatment-resistant depression, both of which have done much to raise the profile of this research. In the US, Johns Hopkins University, with whom I collaborated on the first trial investigating psilocybin-assisted therapy for the treatment of nicotine addiction, has been the most prominent research team in America. As the research expands, the misplaced taboo around these compounds begins to dissipate. But another mini-wave has been capturing the media attention for the past few years: the increasingly popular trend of microdosing. This growing public interest increases the obvious need for rigorous scientific studies to inform us about its potential benefits and drawbacks. However, the use of low to medium doses of LSD is not really a new phenomenon. I have long been attracted by the experience of regular dosing to reach a level where one's consciousness is enhanced, but one remains in control. This was the experience I learned to value greatly back in the 1960s. I was first introduced to LSD in 1965. In the years that followed, other than the mystical or peak experience, my aim was to hit that sweet spot where vitality and creativity are enhanced while leaving me in the control of my concentration. I grew to love this state. It was, in a way, comparable to what people are doing today with microdosing. From my own experience before LSD was criminalized, mini and medium dose approach was a very interesting complementary way of making use of the potential benefits of LSD. I found that having the full palette of alternative doses available to enhance cognitive functioning, mood, focus, and increased awareness was a great advantage. My interest in the science underlying the effects of LSD began in 1966 when I met and started working with Bart Hughes, who had developed two game-changing hypotheses. One, linking changes in consciousness to changes in cerebral circulation. Two, providing a mechanistic description of the ego. I find these explanations life-changing, as they enabled me to live and work on LSD, and in my opinion, to see much further and deeper than I would have been able to without them. In those days, we took high doses, but by using them regularly and with a methodical use of vitamin C and glucose, we became able to better navigate this elevated state of consciousness. So the experience was more like a strong microdose, or, as I used to call it, a psychovitamin, which enhanced work, creativity, self-discovery, and enjoyment, and provided a new and more profound insight into psychology, physiology, and the science of consciousness. For relaxation in the evenings, we played endless games of Go, an ancient Chinese game. I found that playing Go was a perfect test of increased cognition. It enabled one to explore the particular changes in cognitive functioning that occur with medium doses of LSD, a mode of thinking that is much more fluid and intuitive and is conducive to that aha moment which comes with intuitive pattern recognition due to a looser, less constrained state of consciousness. This period of my life fundamentally influenced my future endeavors. From the early 70s, I realized that the only way to break through the barricades of repression built up by prohibition was with the very best science. I decided to devote my life to understanding more about the brain and how to improve its functioning, and to undertake scientific research in an attempt to unravel some of the mysteries underlying consciousness and its altered states. Ultimately, this led me to setting up the Beckley Foundation 30 years later. My aim was, and still is, to reintegrate these valuable compounds into the fabric of modern medicine and society, and to make their benefits available to those in need. Through the Beckley Foundation, I established collaborations with leading scientists around the world. The most fruitful of these collaborations has been with Professor Dave Nutt, with whom I set up the Beckley Bristol program in 2005, which in 2008 became the Beckley Imperial Research Program. We were later joined by Robin Cahart Harris as principal investigator. Instead of starting our program with investigating LSD, as I had hoped, we started with psilocybin. As it is less taboo, no one knowing how it is spelt or indeed what it means. Only later were we finally able to conduct the first brain imaging study on LSD in humans. I'd been dreaming about for years. Our work so far has primarily been focused on larger doses of psychedelics, demonstrating the key role that the peak experience plays in the long-term therapeutic effects. I find it fascinating that the mystical experience is so closely correlated with the positive therapeutic outcomes. However, I believe that microdosing will also have a valuable role to play in the psychedelic spectrum of therapy and as a tool to improve cognition and well-being. It can act as a nootropic or a psychovitamin, improving mood, cognitive functioning, and many other potential attributes. In order to test this hypothesis, I'm developing an exciting multi-armed microdosing research program with a number of collaborators around the world. As part of the Beckley Imperial Research Program, we are conducting the first placebo-controlled naturalistic study of microdosing led by Balazs Sigeti, and David Arizzo will have told you about it this morning. This research is unique in the sense that it is the first to introduce a self-blinding procedure where the participants set up their own placebo control. We are still recruiting participants for the study, so do apply if interested. Although much valuable information can be gained through the naturalistic studies, lab-based studies, are essential in order to investigate the underlying changes in brain function and gather other important measures. Measures. It will be particularly interesting to compare the changes in neural activity, functional connectivity, blood flow, and if possible, capillary volume, to what happens with larger doses. However, prior to diving into this expensive brain imaging study on microdosing, the first step was conduct a dose-finding study to identify the different characteristics of the various low doses. Most people do not know for sure what LSD dose they're microdosing with, as it can only be secured illegally, and it is still not clear what is the ideal dose, particularly if different doses suit different people. To investigate this, in 2017, I set up a collaboration with Jan Remaker at the University of Maastricht. In our recently completed dose findings microdosing study, we tested the effects of a placebo and 3 different doses of LSD, 5, 10, and 20 micrograms, on mood and cognitive performance. Although data are still being analyzed, a few interesting findings have already emerged. 1, microdosing at the doses typically used between 10 and 20 is definitely not subperceptual. Participants could tell the difference between placebo and doses of 10 or 20, as one would expect, I would have thought. 2, looking at the effects on mood, the 20 mics dose was associated with elevated mood and more energy. It is somewhat surprising that positive effects on mood were not picked up at 10 mics. 10 mics, as that is the most likely, the closest to what most people typically microdose with. And reports of positive effects on mood are among the most consistent effects noticed across most observational studies. One possible explanation for this is that the effect of microdosing on mood is closely linked to the type of activities people are engaged in. In our study, participants spent most of their time filling in questionnaires and performing tasks, which is not an ideal setting to generate positive feelings. Before I talk about our next microdosing study, let me briefly discuss a rather fascinating property of psychedelics. That is, their ability to promote the growth of nerve cells and the connection between them in a process called neuroplasticity. All learning and adaptation is based on neuroplasticity. Last year, an exciting study published in Cell reported that the classical psychedelics are capable of robustly increasing the growth of neurites and synapses, both in vitro and in vivo. Researchers from the University of California found that LSD, DMT, and DOI significantly increased the growth and complexity of neurons, with LSD showing the most striking effects. This property of enhancing neuroplasticity, i.e. forming new connections between neurons, is likely to play an important part in the therapeutic benefit of psychedelic compounds, helping to consolidate the changes and insights that can be brought about by psychedelic therapy. In studies we have carried out so far as part of the Beckley Imperial Research Program with psilocybin and LSD, we have shown the dramatic increase in communication between normally distinct areas of the brain, which appear to correlate with the subjective report of ego dissolution. The peak experience is a richer state of consciousness, characterized by a more complex, less predictable, and more entropic, less organized or constrained neural activity. These shifts in brain function can facilitate personality changes by temporarily rendering our neuronal circuitry less constrained and more plastic, thereby allowing the overcoming of rigid, maladaptive patterns of thought which underlie most mental illnesses, such as depression, addiction, and post-traumatic stress disorder. In this state of increased plasticity, a new imprint can be laid down, which is better adapted to the individual's healthy functioning and development. As an illustration of this richer state of connectivity, our brain imaging study with 25 mics of LSD demonstrated that increased levels of connectivity in the visual cortex, which extends its connectivity to over 20 extra brain regions, including those involved in memory and emotional processing, thereby creating a much richer sensory and emotional experience. What the new findings are now showing at the cellular level is that this fluid state brought about by psychedelics within the whole brain is also reflected in the neural cells themselves through an increased ability to create new connections with other cells. I find it really fascinating how psychedelics appear to open up our own connection and growth potential at so many different levels, from cells to brain networks to our relationship to others and to nature. This ability of psychedelics to promote neuroplasticity in the brain opens up a wide range of potential therapeutic applications beyond the field of psychiatry, such as neurodegenerative disorders and even rehabilitation following brain trauma, and may also explain the long-term positive personality changes brought about by these compounds. With our collaborators in Brazil, we're carrying out a series of very exciting studies in this area. With Professor Siddhartha Ribeiro and his colleagues, we're looking into the effects of LSD on cognition and cognitive rescue at all ages. Professor Stevens Rehens, another of our colleagues in the Beckley Brazil collaboration, is also conducting some fascinating work. He will be speaking at 12 o'clock tomorrow in this hall. Stevens and his colleagues at the Door Institute have developed a new approach to cultivating laboratory-made mini-brains grown from human stem cells in order to study neurological diseases and the effects of new drugs on the nervous system. This cutting-edge approach allows us to investigate the effects of LSD on the brain in greater detail and further to explore new applications with a particular focus on neuroplasticity, neurogenesis, and inflammation, 3 areas where the psychedelics can play an important role. As part of this translational research program, we are currently looking into the effects of LSD on cognitive functions, moving between mini-brains, rats, and humans. Moving back to microdosing, one of the hypotheses I'm most interested in testing is whether the regular use of low doses of LSD may be able to increase neuroplasticity, which may produce long-term beneficial changes in behavior. The effect of microdosing on brain function and neuroplasticity has never been investigated in humans and could considerably enhance our understanding of the possible therapeutic value of low doses of LSD. Microdosing could be an alternative way of benefiting from some of the extremely valuable therapeutic properties of psychedelics in a way that is more manageable than the larger doses, both for patients and for therapists. In our lab-based microdosing study, taking place as part of the Beckley Maastricht research program, we are comparing the acute and long-term effects of LSD microdosing on brain network connectivity and on neuroplasticity using EEG, and relating those changes to to the effects observed on mood and cognitive functions. What I have presented here today is only the beginning of an ambitious LSD research program, which is covering multi-centers worldwide and will explore a wide range of doses and possible therapeutic applications. Our future microdosing studies will explore a range of specific conditions, from pain to mood to cognitive decline and various other applications, including studies to investigate improvement in well-being through, for instance, the enhancement of mindfulness and openness and enjoyment in nature. Albert Hoffman once told me his greatest joy was when an inner-city youth would tell him how a small dose of LSD had opened his or her eyes to the beauty of nature. Much more exciting results from our work will soon become available on the LSD front, and we are also continuing our research into psilocybin and DMT with 3 recently completed studies using cutting-edge neuroimaging tools to gain a better understanding of the mechanisms of action of these compounds as part of the Beckley Imperial and the Beckley Maastricht research programs. Sadly, because of lack of time, I cannot develop on this further. However, I invite you to visit our website and indeed come to the Beckley table. Before ending my talk, I would like to bring up our great need of funding to investigate the full potential and benefits of LSD has been my particular passion ever since the late 1960s, where I grew to love and know the great benefits of this compound. I made it my life's work to dedicate myself to the study of the human condition and what makes us such an exceptional animal, but at the same time, an animal with a serious problem at the core of our being. The introduction of the ego mechanism, which became a unique characteristic of Homo sapiens, was at the core of my new understanding of the problem. The brain imaging studies we did as part of the Beckley Imperial Research Program appeared to confirm our original hypotheses. Psychedelics reduce the blood supply to the default mode network, the likely physiological basis of the ego, thereby reducing its repressive function of controlling what enters consciousness and what does not. By boosting its censorship, the brain becomes much more interconnected, neuroplastic, and capable of changing embedded patterns. Now, 50 years later, with the world waking up to the great potential of these psychedelic compounds to improve our approach to healing human sickness, it has become possible for us to expand the work of the Beckley Foundation by setting up collaborations with a much wider network of scientists and institutions around the world, and to build up a greater understanding of the numerous benefits that these compounds can engender with intelligent use. Great breakthroughs are in sight. The only thing limiting the full blossoming of this potential is the lack of the necessary funding to carry out this much-needed research. Thanks a lot for your attention.